Today's reading comes from the Gospel of Mark. From there, Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now, the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Jesus said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then Jesus said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then, looking up into heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." So in today's gospel, we have the story of when Jesus behaved very badly. Now, a lot of ink has been spent on trying to explain away Jesus' words or make it seem like it wasn't that bad. But it was. This is not one of those moments when we don't understand the context of calling someone a dog. In Jesus' time, that was still an insult. No question. But whenever somebody messes up, it's important to try and figure out what's going on behind the scenes, not necessarily to excuse the behavior, but to understand where it is coming from. Because honestly, it's pretty much always important. You can't fix something unless you know what the cause is, right? Way back in the middle of chapter 6, just after Mark told us how John the Baptist died, Jesus said to his disciples, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." Because they couldn't eat or rest since people were always around them needing to be taught or healed or fed. But between that statement and this story in the span of one chapter, Jesus has not been resting. He has multiplied loaves and fishes in order to feed 5,000 people. He has walked on water. He has calmed a storm. He has healed the sick at Gennesaret. He has confronted the Pharisees and some scribes about the way they live out their faith, thus poking the beast of authority. In other words, from the story immediately preceding this one, in which he calls out those scribes and Pharisees, we know Jesus is getting testy. And now he has attempted to withdraw again by traveling far away from where people should know his name, going to a Gentile city, a Phoenician port under Roman rule where no one should know his reputation. He enters a house rather than staying outside where he could accidentally heal someone and attract attention. Jesus is hoping to stay out of the limelight this time. Except that it doesn't work, because even here in this place where he should not be known, Jesus is found by yet another person who needs his care. And this time it's a Gentile woman, a Greek woman of Syrophoenician origin whose daughter has a demon. This is literally the thing that Jesus has been doing this whole time throughout Mark. It is his thing. It is what he is known for. At this point, he probably is so good at casting out demons that it doesn't take all that much effort anyway. And he is so tired. He came here to take a couple of vacation days. He has tried to unplug, shut off his phone, get away from the crushing needs of the people for just a minute. And there's another ping. Can you just do this one more little thing for me? So Jesus snaps back. He's exhausted and done, and he shows it. He thinks that because this woman is a Gentile, he can draw the line in the sand and say, I am not here for you. And then, to kind of seal his point, he calls her a dog. Something that clearly shows the division between the people of the God of Abraham and the Greeks. Now, it is important to note that Mark probably didn't think there was much wrong with what Jesus said here, or he wouldn't have included it in his gospel. Remember, Mark might have agreed with Jesus, or Mark might not have cared one way or another whether Jesus was perfect, since the obsession with the idea that Jesus should have been perfect didn't come until hundreds of years later. Side note, in fact, the idea that Jesus was not fully human was debunked as a heresy in the 4th century at the Council of Constantinople. For those of you who are keeping track, that heresy was called Apollinarianism. In any case, this is one of the moments we get when Jesus' humanity is on full display. Jesus has not taken his own advice yet, and he won't rest until he dies. He is not magnanimous and above exhaustion. He is not so divinely endowed with energy that it cannot run out. He does not possess a limitless well of compassion. My big takeaway from this story is that even really lovely people have their limits. Even really lovely people with the best intentions screw up sometimes. Even people whose deep vocational identity is to serve others need a break sometimes, or else they too will break. But then, when Jesus gets called out for treating this other child of God so poorly, Jesus does what he can to make the Syrophoenician woman's life better. He does not simply wallow in feelings of guilt. In this story, he doesn't even acknowledge he was wrong, but he does heal her in the name of a God she doesn't even worship. In this moment, Jesus' ministry is opened not only to the Hebrew people, the people of the promise, the people of the covenant, but to the Gentiles as well, to us. Jesus is in the business of restoring people to community by feeding, by teaching, and in this story especially, by healing. And that kind of work doesn't allow for exclusion based on petty human differences. In recognizing this wider scope of his ministry and acknowledging that this ministry will reach further than perhaps he had ever imagined, Jesus' own understanding of himself and of his calling, too, becomes more open. I think it's important to mention that Jesus does not get a minute's peace until he's up on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, just before coming back down the mountain on his journey to the cross. He doesn't get a moment of restoration until he takes it intentionally. But he does, over the next chapter or so, continue to meet the needs of the people he encounters, healing and teaching and feeding. I know that there are many folks listening to this, including myself, who will move heaven and earth for other people. But when is the last time you took a moment to rest, truly? At this beginning of the semester, setting a pattern of work and rest is super important. And rest might not look like sleeping. It might look like taking time away or exercising or going for a walk in the woods or lying on the grass just looking up at the clouds. But whatever it is, humans need rest in order to be who we are called to be and in order to serve well. Even Jesus had his limits, and even Jesus had a moment when he said something that should shock us. And perhaps it was Jesus' exhaustion that prevented him from seeing the expanded possibilities that were right there in front of him when the Syrophoenician woman came to him. And by recognizing the fabricated nature of the division between himself and the Syrophoenician woman and his resulting healing of her daughter, Jesus brings himself into community with her, even as he restores her to her own community. Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman are no longer others to each other. They're both just children of God. Today's gospel exemplifies both the need for rest and the need for restoration. We are in a time of extreme exhaustion and division, and this story offers us both an example of what not to do and of what to do when there's a rift that can be healed. Throughout Mark, Jesus heals those who ask and those who don't, those who are inside the covenant and those who stand outside of it. And in each of these stories, we see the ways in which Jesus heals us and our communities and brings us closer to each other and to God. Jesus, who continues to be present around and among us, continues to heal our divisions, and we are the ones who get to be that healing presence in our communities as the hands and feet of Christ, who has first healed us. Amen.